I think you can have some epic videos as well. I saw like I remember I had a call with a developer a while ago, and it was funny. Like they had like a Mordor animated in the background, like a Mount Doom. It was so
It
funny.
must be really distracting though.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it was great actually. Like I was just clapping in the first 5 minutes of the call. So awesome.
Oh man.
How's everybody doing? Everybody healthy?
Pretty healthy. Miikka, I see you go on these like epic runs on Strava.
Oh yeah, I'm being a little too healthy. Like I'm feeling it in my knee. Like I actually like trying to do 40-50 kilometers a week, but it's just proving hard on the old legs. I guess I'm getting older or something.
I'm trying to ramp up too. It's been a challenge.
I just came back from a run, so
oh yeah.
You had to make it fast because otherwise I wasn't going to be in time here.
I felt like I'm like just picking it up because I can't go to the gym anymore. So it's just like, well, this is something you can do outside.
Yeah, it's super good. Like I feel so good after a morning run, especially when it comes to getting to work, starting the work day. It's the perfect way to do it. I'm just sometimes too lazy. If I do it, I overdo it. That's my problem.
Yeah.
0 or 150%.
Yeah, I think that's a big mistake. I've done this running and overrunning because it felt so good and I felt so great. Yeah. And my body's like, yeah, it's really powerful and it's getting better. And then I fucked up my knees. And then I went to a physicist, and he said, yeah, that's like the normal beginner's mistake, that you overdo it and your muscles don't keep up, like the muscles grow, especially that they're not stable enough. Yeah, it's now I just run two times a week max. This is what my knees can still keep up with and hold.
Same here. 36 years old, can't do it anymore.
Yeah, playing football is also like not having played football is not a good thing. It really messes with your body.
Yeah, when I do, it's like literally 2 weeks off from everything, and I cannot go up the stairs anymore. But it's just too much fun to resist in the end of the day.
I think we're now 2 minutes over time, which is not really a big thing, but maybe from running into business, we can have a smooth transition and start the session, and then just see where this path is like leading us to. So I'm just going to start right now. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, speakers. Good morning, dear audience. My name is Tim Rittmann. I'm the program director of the Games Week Berlin. Welcome you to the first Games Week Berlin session on Zoom today. So this Games Week Berlin, we are focusing on a lot, at least, on funding and financing games. So there are so many options, and here we're going to speak about what you're going to do when the game got funded, has been produced and shipped out, which usually means mostly being released on one of the many of the existing platforms. And because this is when many mobile games as well as PC games and console games then face the next wave of challenges in times of games as a service, with live events and regular content updates, where they're a must. It's like post-release is pre-release, and the cost of acquiring user for mobile games has been decreasing from year to year, and at the same time the cost of converting installed users into paying users has increased noticeably. This is a quote, by the way. And but those users are keeping up a community alive, and they keep a game going. And in this session, we're going to take a look at strategies for better retention for various platforms and markets. And we have 4 speakers today. With me are Martine Spaans. She's owner of Tamalaki. And Tamalaki is a publisher of mobile games on both iOS and Android. And the company mainly serves an audience of women 30 plus who love hidden object, match 3, simulation, and puzzle games. So this is something which you probably have in common with Wooga as well, who I think have, at least with June's Journey, like at least one similar product.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I mean, we definitely, I think, go after a similar audience.
then we have the Nathaniel Barker from Kolibri Games. He's the director of business development there. Kolibri Games, for those who don't know, Kolibri Games is in Berlin like a shooting star in the mobile game studio universe, and has recently been acquired by Ubisoft. And Kolibri has specialized in idle games and is going to follow a focused data-driven approach on decision-making as well. Welcome, Nate.
Hey everyone, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Miikka Luotio, is the pronunciation okay? How is it?
No, it's absolutely terrible. Never say that again.
No.
No, it's actually perfect. You did it well. Acceptable.
Yeah,
I rated 8 out of 10 Finnish.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, 8 out of 10. Some room to improvement always, right?
Okay, yeah, that's true. I can also count to 3. C. Coleman.
Oh my God.
I know.
We have to go to sauna next.
Yes. Yeah. After, like post-corona, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so Miikka is the new business development manager at Xsolla. Before that, you handled relations as partnerships VP at Superscale.
Yeah, and 15 years on mobile industry, and right now focusing on cross-platform and going beyond mobile as well. Not completely leaving that yet, because I'm not finished with mobile. Thank you very much, but keeping left foot there at least, or a toe.
And last but not least, Bastian Winterkemper of Liftoff Mobile. He's working as a client partner at the Silicon Valley-based company Liftoff that is transforming the way mobile app marketers acquire and retain users. And Bastian will present the latest Liftoff mobile gaming apps report as well, or at least parts of it, not all of it, because otherwise this session would probably take too long.
I would just give a tease, no worries.
And maybe just one question to Miikka. Can you tell me a little bit about Xsolla? Just give us a short introduction what Xsolla actually is doing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the top line, we are essentially a business growth engine for video games across platforms, and we handle a lot of payments for large companies on the PC side, and work with big publishers as well, and mid-tier companies, and even indies to help them grow their businesses on games in many different ways. I can talk about that later too. But in a nutshell.
Thank you. Then Martine, can you give us a short introduction of what you are doing right now? Just like what you're working, the current project.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you've already given a great introduction about the company. But yeah, currently, so basically this year we have 2 games that we're really focused on, which are current hit games. One of those games is Home Designer Blast, which is a block blasting plus room design game. So this virtual background, my own house is not this clean, but this is the one I designed in my game. So yeah, that's, I mean, we're rolling it out into very different languages now. I think we're up to 17 languages now, in cooperation with our Middle Eastern launch partner, Tamalaki. They take part of that part of the world for us. And the other big one is Runefall, which is a match 3 game. It was actually quite an innovative one, because in regular match 3 games, you basically have your playing field and that's it, and you stay there. But with Runefall, it's kind of like a dungeon explorer. So with all the matches you make, you sort of gradually move your way across the whole big match 3 level. And that's doing quite well as well. And also working on the worldwide rollout for that. So that's what's keeping us busy this year.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you. Nate? one short maybe introduction of Kolibri. I recently, I think I saw it on LinkedIn that Kolibri has been announced as the fastest growing company, digital company in Germany or even in Europe. So what does it mean? How fast do you grow? Do you outgrow the big building you're in? Do you have more and more open jobs to give away? Where's the growth and what does it mean?
Sure. So I think right now at Kolibri is actually pretty exciting because we're growing in a bunch of different dimensions. I was told that I should gesture within the box, so you'll see me awkwardly try this today. We're growing in a bunch of different dimensions. So number one, we're hiring pretty aggressively. We started off like just a small group of students in Karlsruhe and moved to Berlin about maybe 2 years ago and grew from like 10 people to 100. So that might account for some of the press. We are hiring. We're hiring primarily because we're building a bunch of new games, which is exciting. Our objective is to be the leader in idle games. And so I think what we want to do, now that we have a lot of learnings from Idle Miner Tycoon, which I'll share a bit of today, we want to release a bunch of new idle games and sort of challenge what it means to be an idle game. I mean, I could wax on forever about the history of idle games and the philosophy behind them. But what it comes down to is we want to try different idle games with different mechanics for different markets and really see where we can push the boundaries. So because of that, I would say, yeah, we are growing pretty rapidly.
Yeah,
so you should check out our jobs page and then we can work together.
So thank you very much, Nate. Bastian, again, last but not least, because it's all about transitions as well. Can you tell us a little bit about Liftoff? Because Liftoff is not predominantly working on the fields of video games, but video games is just a part of what you're doing right now. Is it right?
Yeah, correct. I think you said it in your introduction. We're a mobile DSP, 100% programmatic. So we're basically plugged into all the different exchanges that are out there, Mopap, for instance, which is Twitter, Google, and so on. So that's where we are getting like a reach, which is probably higher than Facebook. So we have access to more than 3 billion users. And we're working with a lot of gaming companies. I guess probably gaming is on the forefront when it comes to programmatic, which is obviously down to the budgets as well. If you compare it perhaps to some e-commerce companies or retailers in general, and also like the knowledge, programmatic is a fairly new channel. So if you look at the ecosystem, we will be sitting probably between search, Google, and then social, Facebook, and try to position ourselves as the go-to platform within the display, mobile, in-app space. So we do actually work with a lot of gaming companies like Playrix, Tencent, Voodoo on the casual side. I think Vuga was mentioned. Hi to the Vuga team if you are out there, the performance team. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. And maybe what we want to do and what we agreed on, that you share some of the insights of your market report. Maybe we just start with that now.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm just going into screen share mode. Just a second. So I hope you can see my screen. Thumbs up, please. Yeah, perfect, excellent. Yeah, I promise I'm not going through all the data. There's actually a report, I think, which is 65 pages. So for today, let's just use it as an opener to recap the status quo of the industry. And Tim has already mentioned the challenges and opportunities. So I believe the opportunities are quite clear. Based on the report, we're coming to this in the next slide. CPIs are down, but CPAs are up. First of all, just on the methodology, because I'm sure you're seeing a lot of data from lots of different sources. And yeah, they can be inflated in some cases. So here we're looking at 697 apps that we had access to or that we worked with in the past. The data is combined with AppsFlyer as a neutral MMP here. So that's where we also got some good insights on the retention of our customers. We're looking at 6.5 million in-app purchases. So that's quite a lot, resulting in almost 28 million in revenue. So well, I guess ultimately everyone here in the audience, that's what you're looking to not only just get installs, but convert them actually into purchases and make your money. Yeah, the good news, first of all, it's yeah, we saw a big decrease in terms of CPI. CPI. So if we're speaking about acquisition here, that is just making people install your apps. I think an acquisition actually would rather be in connection to activating those installers and convert them into users, because an install doesn't mean necessarily that they play your game. So and the activation of an installer and convert them into payers has actually decreased massively. We've got another slide on conversion rates, but ultimately it resulted in 56% increase of costs versus 2018. So in the chart on the left side, you see in 2017, CPAs were much higher, while CPIs were also quite low. I guess that's probably down to the fact that the ecosystem wasn't as developed yet. People were not playing that many games. I think we have other people on the panel here who can shed some more light there. But yeah, and then 2018, 2019, the ecosystem boomed a lot. I think overall, still very, very good news, very good times for any of the publishers here. The market is booming overall. I think $30 billion market was the latest stats that I've come across. So overall, it's great for the audience to be here, great for the other panelists to be here, because there's definitely money to be made. I left slides out in regards to COVID, might be not too ethical, but I suppose a lot of you guys are actually benefiting from those times. So yeah, I guess you're not crossing your fingers for a second lockdown, but overall what we've seen, it's been having a positive impact of the for the entire ecosystem. So that being said,
that's interesting. I can also report that on the PC and Steam side of things, like I just recently read an article, I can link to that later, that basically after the lockdown, every day of the week has become a weekend on Steam sales in terms of sales on Steam, Steam games, and that's pretty incredible.
So you're actually hoping for the next lockdown to come in?
I don't think anybody wants to say that because that's when you jinx it, right?
Well, two sides of it. No, but that's good to hear. Like some first-hand feedback here. It's definitely what we've been seeing across the board. That being said, the data is obviously only till May. So let's see how the trend lines are if we have the next version of that next year. But yeah, still good times for the ecosystem. But the focus is clear. Publishers need to look into strategies, how they can decrease those CPAs and push their installers down the funnel. Yeah, I mentioned already the conversion rates are historically low. So it's all about improving the stickiness of your apps, I suppose, here. Interestingly, and that being said, well, obviously coming from a paid channel here, programmatic is a paid channel. What we've seen that non-organic users, or that you ultimately have to pay for, they actually show higher retention than organic. Of course, you do have to pay for that channel, but in general, that's good news. So users are stickier within non-organic across all the paid channels, which makes sense because targeting options are better, or organic could be coming from different sources that are not as targeted. But again, I'll leave that to the publishers themselves to elaborate on it later. In general, yeah, the longer you look into the data, so the return is still there, especially if you open up the window to 30 days. So we see an average 38% ROAS. also here would be interesting to discuss with the publishers what their optimization strategy is, monetization strategy. I think there are different channels that have different optimization algorithms based on day 7 or long-term LTVs and so on. But generally, there's still a good return. Interesting chart here. If you compare iOS versus Android, not sure how new that is. I think it's been quite logic that iOS costs more, but drives a higher ROAS. The interesting thing that based on the last year's data is that the ROAS is actually not that much higher compared to Android, whilst Android shows 4 times less cost. So that could lead to the assumption that it makes sense if you're launching your game. So if you're an early stage publisher or also big publisher just launching your game, that might make sense to start on the Android platform, test the stickiness of your app and overall conversions before making the move into iOS. Well, as we're based in Germany, I guess, well, I'm based in Germany. I'm actually not sure everyone else is based from the audience, but hi from Berlin, by the way, from the Liftoff office here. I'm
Berlin as well.
Yeah. And Martine, you as well, or?
No, I'm in the Netherlands.
Okay, cool. I was thinking so. By the way, I apologize. I don't have that nice Games Week Berlin screen on it. I try it later again. So yeah, you find me in our office, probably like for the last couple of days, and then before the full lockdown comes. But yeah, so here's a slide on Germany. We still see second highest ROAS, which is good. So Germany, I think everyone knows, quite expensive market, but ROAS on a global scale is still really good. So it's definitely a market to consider if you can pay for the installs. I'm coming to more slides focusing on different geos to highlight some additional opportunities. So yeah, here looking at North America, because when we're speaking of loyal gamers, so high retention rates, then North America, and that would be the US and Canada, where you find different data, of course, across the two. But combining the market and the entire region, you still see that retention rates are at top in North America, but also comes with the caveat of high installs. So you see on the left side, I think that is the most interesting one, that you see users lapsing from day 1 down to day 30. So after 30 days, you have only 3.1% of the users still on your app, and that's like where re-engagement probably comes into everyone's marketing strategy. Super important here if you want to increase the lifetime of your users. That's also what we see that in gaming. I said earlier that usually gaming is very advanced when it comes to testing different channels, especially on programmatic, whilst e-commerce, retail, travel are probably lacking that experience. But compared to those verticals, yeah, gaming is very much behind on the re-engagement side, on the retargeting side. So based on our data and also the accounts, the clients we're working with, there's only an adoption rate of retargeting between 15 to 20%. So that's definitely an opportunity to increase your overall retention stickiness of the apps. But again, after those slides, I'm sure Tim will touch on that. Yeah, I mentioned in the US, CPIs are quite high. Interesting enough, they have increased by almost 15% versus the previous year. So yeah, that's just a sign that install costs have basically risen across the globe, but for the US the most. Whilst in APAC, you see, yeah, it's kind of mixed. So you see high CPIs, but also low CPAs and a high ROAS overall. Yeah, just to maybe quick background on data, I've mentioned that it's across all kind of verticals. So you find casual, mid-core, hardcore, hyper-casual, social casino games in there as well. So that's why the data is a little bit scarce. We do have a breakdown per vertical. If you want to have a deeper look later on and dive into your specific vertical, that's for the audience here. It's definitely worth it. And you find numbers varying. So that is just an average. And looking at APAC is big. APAC is interesting. I think the good numbers here, if you look at the overall ROAS, are driven by Japan big time. So for Japan, the 30-day ROAS is actually 10 percentage points higher than the global benchmark, so which is sitting somewhere about between 30 and 33% if you're looking into 30-day ROAS. So yeah, I guess in general, the big money is made always in North America and Japan as the most interesting geo. I believe it's a very tricky geo as well. You need to localize your product. Like your creatives are completely different from the Western world, and not obviously goes for other APAC countries. China, of course, it's also another thing, completely different culture. I think that makes it in general very, very hard for at least our customers to tap into other markets, because it takes like some time and a lot of money and resources to localize your product. But yeah, Japan is a very, very interesting market. And also, if we're looking into overall retention rates, so I mentioned North America being the lowest kind of region. If we break it down into specific geos, then Japan sticks out by far. So if we again look into the day 30 chart, you can see the green column with 5.7%, which is yeah, 40% higher than what is it, like South Korea there. So it's quite tricky to figure out the different countries. It's actually dark blue is Brazil. And then you have the light blue, which is Korea, also a big target typically, but then retention is very low, even though ROAS can be very high. What we've seen that the Brazil is actually quite a target. Most of the advertisers I've been working with recently, that they all ask about Brazil, because you see cheap CPIs, but then the ROAS is very, very low. So you really need to have a good product proposition for that market. Just as a tease here, speaking about Brazil, so you have the LATAM data to the right hand, but to the left hand, and then that's based on the report, I'm asked quite a lot what's going on with the Caribbean. So we see very cheap installs, a little bit higher than in LATAM, and then super high ROAS. So it's definitely a gem, a hidden gem, so to say, because not many people advertise there. So that's why CPMs are still pretty low. On the ROAS side, it looks quite high. To be fair, here I would say that the data is probably not as solid as for the other regions. So not that many gaming advertisers so far targeting the Caribbean, but those that do see definitely a good ROAS. So that is something to look into. I think the tricky part here within your marketing mix is to find a strategy in order to combine all those countries, because it's a lot of different smaller countries. Yeah, if you want to bundle them, I think there are some limitations for different marketing channels, but definitely worth looking into this. So yeah, just summarizing here. Again, I stated it's still overall really fruitful times. There's a lot of money to make. Looking at 2 years back, costs have increased. Sorry, CPIs have decreased, but then to push your users further down the funnel has gotten more expensive. There are different techniques that we're now touching on further during that session. The really alerting piece is that only basically 1 in every 2 apps is able to retain their users. See uninstall rates after 30 days. We saw the 3% that are staying within the app. So that is the tricky part, and yeah, most of the users drop off. How can you avoid that? Increase the stickiness. I mentioned it earlier. Do re-engagement. I think there's a next slide on re-engagement quickly, but let's dive into it as with the panel. Another interesting thing, huge. They're pretty big in the social gaming sphere. Probably one of the highest spenders across the globe here. So they have high scale, see a lot of data. When we talk with them, I find it always interesting how they approach teamwork, because yeah, what you sometimes hear is from the marketers that they don't really support what the product team is doing, because they're building a product that is not really sticky. If the product is not really sticky, as a marketer, you cannot really fight against it. So it's super important to connect the different activities. And then I think more and more companies follow that approach, but in the past it hasn't been like this. So that's something to look at. And then the other thing is to work really closely with your creative team, because that's where you can see a lot of uplift. I think looking at all the channels, you can kind of find ways to sort of trick the algorithms and like of your partners, or optimize them in the best possible way. And that's one part to get better performance. But you cannot get good performance if the creatives are shit. So that's the other part, which I hope all the marketers out there are doing. Yeah, without further ado, thanks again for having me and letting me run through those numbers. So hope I got a good recap here of the status quo, and I'm handing it back to Tim here and to the panel to dive deeper into all those different points. So let me just stop sharing my screen and go back into the panel.
Thank you very much, Bastian. So I have directly two follow-up questions. Maybe you also have things that you want to ask, because the numbers we're talking, of course. Maybe first of all, like one question that is a little bit more specific. When you showed Japan, we saw that the drop-off rates were not as steep as in other markets. And you said that it's kind of fascinating that they can handle this. And for me, it was interesting as well. And I'm just like thinking now and want to hear your opinion. Do you think that this is because they know their customer base better, because they mostly like produce for a single market that is strong enough, and that they don't lose, I don't know, because of friction that comes from localization, maybe when you produce something for a worldwide market? Or what could be the reason here?
Yeah, I think there are probably two parts to it. So that data that I've showed, obviously, or not obviously, but contains data from Japanese advertisers as well. I don't know the percentage, but I think overall, compared to other global companies, it's probably still a minority. So I wouldn't factor in that advantage of local marketers there that dominate the data and therefore have higher stickiness. I think in general, it's more down to the culture, but I would also let the actual publishers speak to it if they are in those markets. But what I can see is definitely down to the culture. It's a gaming culture. I don't know, just watch Lost in Translation or any of those movies, and then how much they're playing there, you know, like in all those different stores they have. So it's definitely a cultural thing. Then the other side, it's definitely tricky for non-Japanese publishers to get into the market. So it takes them typically a long time because they're quite careful to tap into those markets. Western publishers, because they want to do it right. Obviously, it's a lot of testing involved there. But yeah, once they've done it and then scale, it pays off.
Yeah.
I've actually I worked with one game where we had unexpected success in Japan in terms of when we were doing UA campaigns, specifically via Instagram. So I found that very interesting. And the game was, I think it was like one of the, oh God, I forgot the name now. Rumble Star Soccer, I think it was called. And the game had like huge, like very big-headed characters with huge eyes, and it was such a cliche that kind of thing works in Asia, but it actually in this case turned out to be, and none of us really expected that. And I still don't really understand as to why was that so successful compared to other games that I've seen being marketed in, especially Western games being marketed in Japan. So it's pretty cryptic on what, especially on the creative side and the product itself. Like, how do you know if that's going to work in Japan? It's that is the interesting question I'm asking myself quite often.
Sometimes those shortcuts work, sometimes they don't. So this was just a little excursus to Japan. I think this we all know that it's a very special market with very special needs, and that indeed it's hard to get into this market from the outside world. I think it's way more easier for Japanese companies, at least like for the big ones, to cater to Japanophile audiences in the Western world. You also, like Bastian said, that I'm going to touch on it, like looking for users. That one challenge is, of course, like this is maybe something like the premise of this this session. One challenge is, of course, to gain the users, and the others is to keep them. And that, of course, the drop-off is in the first 48 hours to 72 hours is quite big. There is definitely one challenge here to keep as much as possible. So like this goes out to all of you. What do you think? How do you keep players from dropping off? So do you have maybe 3 things where you say, I would definitely like put emphasis on this if you want to put out a mobile game or any game that needs some live operations?
So I think it depends sort of on the time scale that you're looking at when it comes to reducing churn. But there's certain things that we are looking at specifically that, especially early on, are really important for us to reduce players from dropping off. So first and foremost, I think one thing that we put a lot of value in is an intuitive first-time user experience or tutorial. So sort of the advantage with Idle Miner Tycoon and some of the subsequent games that we're currently testing is that we try to make it very clear like what the players have to do. So there's not like a complicated core loop. Generally speaking, most of the action of the games that they're playing, it's all happening on one screen with minimal amounts of scrolling, right? So it's like tap there, and then your mine or whatever other business you're running just starts moving. So for us, that sort of helps to get players into it. That's not to say we haven't had some difficulties when it comes to getting people through this process. I think one of the primary ones that we faced really early on, and we sort of discovered through user testing, is that players didn't know that they could actually like expand their mines in Idle Miner Tycoon. So if you haven't played Idle Miner Tycoon, it's a game where you run a mine. It's held in, so this is important, it's in portrait, the orientation of the game. So when you open it up in your first plane, you see sort of the surface, some mine machinery, and one mine shaft. And you can very clearly buy additional mine shafts. But what players didn't realize is that you can do more than buy just 4 mine shafts. 4 is probably about the maximum that fits on a phone screen in portrait mode. You can actually buy 30. And the way that you do this is by scrolling. But for a lot of players, although it would be intuitive to us gamers, a lot of people who are maybe new to this don't realize that they could scroll. And so what we found through user testing is that we actually needed to make it much more obvious to people that they can scroll. Why is this important? Well, it's important because if they're not scrolling, they're not advancing, they can't get the second mines, and then it's just sort of a pointless game. It's basically like you're playing half a game. So the second thing that is important for us is to make sure that players understand how they can progress and sort of expand beyond just that core loop. So first part is intuitive. For the second part, we do a little bit more of a hand-holding approach, more arrows, more forced taps and that sort of thing. And I think the final thing that we actually started playing with a little bit more recently, and it sounds maybe more monetization focused, is actually ramping up the difficulty faster. Early on, a guiding principle at our studio was players come first, just make the game as easy and fun as possible and reduce the amount of monetization that you're focused on. And that was really good for building an audience, but what we realized is that certain players at this stage now expect a certain level of difficulty. that difficulty is expressed through monetization choices, meaning are they buying hard currency so they can advance faster? They just kind of expect these things. Are they watching more ads? So a big part of the experiments that we're running right now at our studio are to see where we can tweak difficulty, where we can make it a bit harder, where we can layer on additional complexity earlier on, so that players aren't churning out because they think that there isn't that much to the game. We have a tremendous amount of endgame content, and because the game was built sort of like, you know, I would say maybe this is the case with a lot of developers, where you're sort of like, it's like building a ship as you're sailing. Like you're in the process where you're like adding new planks and new sails. And so if you just look at it from the outside, it looks like maybe it's like this big complete thing, but inside your internal logic was, you know, it was a process. So a big part of this is that we want to make sure that things that seemed obvious to us 2 years ago, like, oh, okay, well, we have the first 10 levels, let's start doing interesting things on level 11. We're actually introducing earlier, or at least we're experimenting with, you know, let's add this research facility earlier so that players can enjoy it earlier. So I would say those are like the three things that we're doing: easy fatuity, guided, more, I guess, hand-holding in the kind of metagame, like and then ramping up difficulty faster.
Okay, thank you very much, Martine. Yes, exactly, because it's game design and game design choices. Maybe you can jump in here directly and tell us a little bit about your experiences.
To jump into this, because it's funny, because at this moment we're also with our team doing kind of a similar thing where I mean, you know, the game's been out for 18 months, Home Designer Blast. And you know, it's kind of the same thing. You start with just the game, and then like a couple months later you add this functionality, and later you add this, etc. And like it kind of, you think it makes sense in the way that you build it up, but right now we decided, like, wait a minute, let's go back to scratch basically, and really focus on the player experience just from the start. And then, of course, like not opening the magic tricks of developer, you know, the magic box of developer tricks, and just cruising through the levels, but really enjoying the game as a player, as an average player. And by just like looking at the game that way, we just found out by playing every day for like 20-30 minutes, like, okay, this can be cleared up, and the order of this tutorial doesn't make sense, and all these tiny little things. I think we made a list of 50 or 60 tiny little changes that we can make in the first 10 days of the player experience, that I think when we're finished with implementing all of those, will make the game just infinitely better and easier to understand. And you know, all those tiny changes added up together, I think they'll benefit like the retention a lot. You know, we're currently where sort of, you know, when we look at the global retention of our game, we're looking at some point like a 3% day 30, and if we can just like get that up to 3.5%, maybe even 4%, you know, that's like a huge leap in terms of the just the way that content is enjoyed by the players.
Yeah. Miikka, what do you think?
Just a little bit of a cross-platform angle here from my perspective. I mean, you know, just to give a slightly different perspective for a couple more platforms on especially like keeping your players in the game. I mean, the age-old question of retention, you know, retention is king on mobile is absolutely true. If you go other platforms, the fun fact is that, you know, they're not driven that much by performance marketing. I mean, arguably web games, you know, you can do direct performance marketing on web games, but when you go to other platforms, the retention, the concept of retention becomes more of you know, more of an organic drive to keep a buzz about your game, where people, through live operations, you're able to retain people that actually like the game. So once you actually manage to find your audience and pick enough audience, you know, you obviously have to look at like, is this game going to be worth the cost to do live operations on. Like, is this title, does it deserve other platform versions? Because like, if you're able to serve a fan base beyond a single platform as well, you know, that is something that I think these days is an interesting question, because people have more time in front of big screens, and for the foreseeable future will stay that way. So the question is offering enough ways for your players to interact with your game. So I think it's good time to actually ask yourself, like, does my game deserve to be on other platforms? Because that will actually also help with you know, retaining your players. Because if you give them ability to play in multiple devices, I think you'll see that your most faithful players will increase the time spent in the game, right? So that's just like my thoughts on it. I think obviously you need to make a fun game, which is the most important thing. Like, screw all the metrics, but like, really, if you don't have a game that carries itself because it's a good game, there's no retention to try to manufacture. I mean, you can make you can try to make a super app out of your game, but then it stops being a game. So you need to draw a fine line between having retention mechanics versus actually, you know, allowing your players to have fun in the game, which is the key. So I've seen in many cases where the drive to improve retention metrics has actually made the game less fun, and I'm sure many other mobile developers can relate to that, because, you know, sometimes some retention mechanics can actually hamper the core fun of the game.
Do you think that it became more difficult or like, do you think that because mobile games and retention mechanics and game loops that probably lead to some kind of microtransaction, for example, that players have become more critical towards these, and that you have to make better ways of integrating them and making them more meaningful? Or is it just, has it changed in any way?
Well, I think like it's on mobile, it's evolving a lot, right? Like, it's the trends of different, for example, retention mechanics are, you know, you can pick up what are the kind of trend lines there, but ultimately, like, I think it boils down to the fact that the industry is definitely changing for games as a service model. So having new content being served to your players, where the players actually feel that they're reading a story that's all the time evolving in some way. I think that's the most pivotal thing. If you look at the most successful games out there, like you look at PUBG, Fortnite, Genshin Impact now, which is, you know, up and coming, really new game. You look at those games are serving content as they would be Netflix themselves in a way. And obviously they have other arguments that they're trying to become a subscription service also in terms of payments, you know, the whole big Apple thing and everything. You know, I think it just goes to prove that games are becoming content delivery systems themselves, within themselves. And I think that's something that is more important now than ever, is to really have constant, fresh, custom content provided into your game that hits the sweet spot of your target audience, no matter what platform you work at your game on. I think that is the most important thing, and it's easier said than done. That's one of the probably the most hardest thing to nail in game development, is really good live operations, you know, and keeping your game alive with new content. That is actually very challenging. Sometimes even more challenging than making a game itself, which is a bit of a paradox, right?
Yeah. But do you think that it's, I mean, there's this one phrase, which I think it was from a game studies academic, who said that you don't throw a ball at someone and wait until it tells stories, which is like, okay, video games are better in like the gameplay part than in the storytelling part. And now what we see is in times like having live operations being more and more important, and maybe story arcs that have to be continued. Is it more important now to really take good care of storytelling if you want to be successful in live operations and not just add new gameplay modes?
I don't know if you guys want to take a stab at that one first. I mean, I can keep yapping here all day long, but I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Well, I would just say it really depends on the game, because like, you know, some hyper casual games have really good retention stats, but no one cares about the story for those. And in fact, I think a story would get in the way of the gameplay for those.
That's a good point. Like that's like one area of type of games that are like really instant, quick, fun games where this doesn't really apply.
I think it also depends a bit on like the definition of story. We in our game, we don't really have a traditional narrative. It's not like it's a mining game. It's not like you're starting off and you're an adventurer and someone gives you a clear objective to mine because you need money for XYZ, like a traditional hero's journey or story arc. We do include some elements of story in our marketing, and we have characters and we have regions to explore. So I think there's pieces of story, and I think a lot of the story that players might be experiencing might be something that they're sort of formulating a narrative in their own heads, like, why am I going here? Why am I they decide for themselves. Why must I go and explore this additional continent to mine more things? Well, it's because I want to see how far I can push myself, or I want to get money for XYZ so I can improve this other part of my mines. So for us, I think in our games, since it tends to be more casual in that regard, story has probably been less important as explicitly told, right? It's more of just like maybe implied story, but not a like a very cinematic style of narrative where there's like clear characters and motivations.
It's a good point, like that you can I think what you're saying there, I think is a good reminder that it's not just about the game story, but it's a story in the community that's playing the game, right? And how you're doing that in marketing, and what kind of like story you're trying to tell with the product itself and how it's played, not necessarily narrative story, right? Like I think good point, Nate.
Yeah, and I think also, for our games, we always make sure that there is a story because it makes sense to the game, but it's never like really forced on the player if they don't want to. So, for example, in Runefall, in the Match 3 adventure game, there's really high production value dialogues with voiceovers. But the user can just easily skip them, and they're not really necessary for the to progress in the game. It's not necessary to know what is said in the dialogues, but the levels are really long. It typically takes like half an hour to finish one of these match 3 dungeon levels, and we do see that people kind of enjoy watching the dialogue after that. It's kind of a little mental break. But yeah, once again, it's there for players to enjoy who appreciate it, and if they don't want to, they just tap skip, and that's it.
What is the game called again? Rune or Runefall?
Runefall. I'll copy it in the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to check it out. I'm a huge fan of. I mean, I produced a few match 3 and puzzle games myself, so
yeah.
Somewhat of a geek for that genre.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you think. I think it's really unique, as in I've never seen a game like this before.
Yeah.
Might be because I don't know about it. But yeah, let me know.
Did you put it on the chat yet?
I'm working on that now.
Cool.
There you go.
Maybe meanwhile, I would like to take even a step back. and go from, okay, that people have acquired the game, have downloaded the game, but the one step before that, people have to find it on a platform. And even if they see it, that the moment they see, okay, there's a game which is certain kind of title that kind of appeals to me, but how important is the presentation on the platform itself, especially when it comes to not only description, but especially the thumbnail? These things, these little things, how important is it to really look at how the coloring of a thumbnail, like making clear that the thumbnail says everything about like the game or what it could promise and all of this?
Tim, by thumbnail, you mean screenshot?
No, I don't mean screenshot. I mean the icon. I mean the icon in the icon.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
But yeah, and that's the devil is in the details there, because those are world of differences, you guys so well know. Yeah.
So yeah, for us, icons is just something we're constantly testing and constantly tweaking. You know, I mean, especially in the Google dashboard, it's like super easy to run A/B tests with your icons and with your screenshots as well. So yeah, we're always just trying out new stuff. You know, also seasonal things, like currently, you know, of course, a Halloween icon, and of course for Christmas, like stick some snow on top of it. It doesn't only help to make the game feel sort of up to date in the stores, but also on the user device itself, because they see, you know, currently if I look at my phone and all the games on there, half of them have a Halloween related icon, and it does give me that feeling that the game, that the live ops is actively being serviced, and that there's something new in the game, and maybe I should open it up again and check it out. So yeah, I'd say not only for the acquisition, but also for the retention, keeping your, you know, experimenting with your icons and changing them up from that every now and then is really good.
Yeah. It's on the side of when we look at PC games, for example, I think in that case, and then looking at Steam, which has like much more real estate when it comes to displaying the game, like you know, you can display the game logo and even a screenshot behind it, or really like huge full screen screenshot. And then when you actually do like a game website, which is one of the main marketing drivers, you know, for example, we have this service at Xsolla where you can use our site builder to build literally like a website for all your game portfolio and sell directly from there. And I think that's like jumping my previous career from being mobile to kind of focusing more on PC. One of the biggest things I've noticed is like how much more real estate you have on the PC and Steam side. And I find it interesting because you know, these are platforms that are not necessarily dependent on any kind of performance marketing drive, and yet you have the opportunity to do that because you just have much more visual real estate for creatives. And it's well, part of it has to do that it's very hard to attribute, you know, paid traffic for PC games to the platforms are different than on mobile. But yeah, it's just a big revelation of realizing like how much real estate you have versus mobile. It's you know, I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's just very different. And I think with mobile, having to work with icon being one of the key things that you iterate, and you can do essentially A/B testing on Google, as Martine said. You can run basically App Store optimization type of tests on your icon. And the weirdest things that I find is that sometimes the only big difference you can make through an icon A/B test is completely switching the icon color. And the more teeth you have and the bigger teeth you have, if you have like character's face in the icon, if the character is screaming with big teeth, seems to work, and nobody really knows why. It's a mystery to me sometimes, like why some icons just work so well. It has seemingly no underlying reason, but it kind of feels that there has to be, but sometimes there really isn't.
I'll add, we also experiment a lot with our with the icons and the screenshots, and the name. So we'll add in all of that like ASO fluff sometimes at the end of our names. We've discovered that there's actually huge differences in icon and screenshot performance between countries. We didn't realize this would be the case before, but it is enormously impactful. So now we start to run different landing pages in various geos. We've also found that advertising, to Martine's point, advertising live ops is extremely helpful. So we'll see thousands of installs per week coming from the ads that we're running, particularly in Google. It's very easy to add like live ops ads and things like that. And it is super helpful for driving re-engagement as well. So I would say it's probably a good thing to invest your time in.
How helpful is it to add or market a game with a mini game that you can play that has kind of nothing to do with the actual game? Something you see here and there, and something that probably works here and there, but it also drives other people crazy when they realize that what they have been playing in the little mini game ad has got really nothing to do with the game itself. What's your opinion on that?
Now also banned in the UK, by the way. Yeah, it's no. Personally, I don't like the practice, and apparently in the UK, the rulings is also that they don't like it because there it's now banned, and I think other countries will follow with sort of these misleading advertising. That it's I think it's also losing effectiveness. Because the whole gimmick of it is kind of wearing off. These ads have been around for about a year now. So yeah, it's my personal preference is I hope we'll see less of them.
Yeah, it's totally true. I think they diminish the whole industry in general, and like especially if you're doing like fake gameplay and stuff. That's how would I say, it will bite you back in the long run. I feel that there's when you were talking about like hyper casual games and such, the most ads where I see that are like faking gameplay and are just trying to like grab you to even install the game, like for some completely unrelated reasons in some ads, even that they're telling you to come in to check out something that's not even the game. And most of these ads I see are definitely in the hyper casual space. I don't know about you guys, but just looking at some ads that I've come across on Facebook, for example.
I think in particular those types of ads are sort of an interesting story, because if you talk to some of the advertisers who are running them, the justification behind it is like, yeah, there's sort of the scammy, hey, we'll do anything we can in order to get somebody to install our game. But then there's also the argument that like, here are, and let's say hypothetically, it's like a puzzle scenario that you're advertising within the game, and the actual game is loosely related, and maybe that's just a character from that other game and it has none of the same game mechanics. But the core idea is, in both these cases, is that they're both about solving puzzles. So it's sort of interesting in that the psychology of the players that you're trying to attract potentially don't care what kind of puzzle they're solving, as long as they're solving puzzles. So maybe they just see something that is about solving puzzles, and that's the type of person you want to get, which is an interesting theory when applied to those ads. I think it is dangerous when you run them, because you risk, as mentioned earlier, the regulatory smackdown coming your way. You risk being memeified, and nobody wants to end up as like a meme on the crappy mobile ads subreddit or something like this. But which is good. It exists. I recommend.
I can just see that Reddit thread in my head somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's there. It's fun.
It's real. It's a real thing.
Yeah, for sure.
You need to shoot me a link later. I want to check it out.
I will dig it up. There's some good ones in there. I mean, it's sort of like I guess it's like an interesting problem. I think they're probably gonna disappear now that they're, as you guys mentioned, they're not so effective anymore. But I guess it was sort of weird while it went. But the one thing I want to add is that because of the amount of pushback that some of these developers have received for running ads that previously had zero to do with their games, now they're adding mini games that they can use to justify, that are just these ads that they can use to justify running the ads. I don't know if the strategy will work, but it's sort of like a weird, like, what are they, what's the phrase? It's like the tail is wagging the dog. It's like suddenly it's like, oh, this thing that, you know, was like a throwaway is now.
You mean the watering down the gameplay, the original gameplay, just to introduce a mini game so they can do the advertising with the mini game and
it's justified
like that?
Yeah.
Well, a funny story about that, by the way, about this puzzle advertising stuff. I've also seen one where it's
like summarizing everything that's wrong with mobile games. Like it's just terrible. Like when you even just when you say that, like if I would go and tell my mom that story, she would be like, "That's horrible. That's like evil." You know, even she would understand that how wrong that is. It's just crazy.
But it's funny to see how other companies are taking advantage of it, because like there's advertising mini puzzle games. I've also seen one where it says like, this is the actual game of the ads. You know, so it was, and it was not a high value game. It was clearly a game that they put together in a month. After seeing those ads and realizing the scam, they were like, we can actually beat that game.
Yeah, actually, like the most hilarious ad I've seen, like people who play this game are likelier to get a girlfriend. Like I think I can't remember which game was it, but it was like a Russian strategy
That's
web
a bold
game.
statement.
I stopped, but it made me stop. So it did exactly what they wanted. I clicked it. I went like, I want to see this game that will get me a girlfriend, because I was just for giggles, you know, shits and giggles. So I went through it and I realized at some point I'm playing this game because the stupid ad like got me, and I thought I was above it, but it totally worked. That was the most depressing thing to realize, that you are trapped, like you're trapped in an IKEA or somewhere. You just wake up there suddenly and you're like, oh my God, I'm in the spoon section.
But you played it out of professional interest, like you had this ironical touch. Everything you did, it wasn't for real. You weren't hooked up.
I actually started playing it like properly, like you know, I'm a gamer, you guys are gamers, and when you're presented a game, it's like muscle memory. You just start like clicking away, start building your town, and then you just wake up in the middle of freaking IKEA spoon aisle. That why am I here? Like why I came to IKEA in the first place?
I would like to really know, like maybe from all of you, when you put out, if it's an app or if it's like specifically a game, and you realize, okay, right now it doesn't work, and you don't have such a rapid iteration strategy, maybe like Kolibri has, I don't know like how fast you iterate, but that you have spent some time on this game, you want to make it work. And you twitch and spin here and there and try to make it better. And it doesn't really get better. When is there something like a tipping point when one should say, okay, that's it, I kill it, and next one?
Yeah, I think like I worked in, I don't know, 4 different publishers now, and I personally killed about 4 games. Most of them I killed before launching, like, or during soft launch. Like I think ultimately, like if you realize after you launch the game that it doesn't work, you have absolutely failed. You need to go take a look in the mirror, punch that mirror, and buy a new one, because you've done something wrong, and then you have to learn from it. Now that the whole team has to understand that it's a failure to let something go so far as to already do live ops to realize the product doesn't work, even if you keep trying. So like ultimately you wanna find that out doing an beta or soft launch, like beta called in like outside of mobile, but most mobile developers call it soft launch, right? That's where you need to make that hard decision. You might have to kill your darling, but if you're waiting until the game is being served fully live operations, I mean, obviously the game will at some point expire. Literally, it will become so old that the player base will not be worth the return of investment to even manage or develop for. And then you just sunset the game. But that's different, right? I don't know what you guys think. I'd love to hear others' opinions too on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've also definitely had to, unfortunately, kill some games. And to really sort of define that moment is always like difficult. I think it's also, you know, it differs per project, and it also differs per situation of the developer. And, you know, I guess the worst situation that you can be in is where a developer says like, well, I know it's not ready yet, but we have to launch it now because we're running out of money. Yeah, and there's this sort of magical idea that when you launch it, then revenue will come, and then you'll have new revenue to finish it and do live ops, and that is the situation that doesn't work out, because you know the whole runway to finally sort of get the game from launch to profitability is always a little bit longer than you would like. You know, I mean, we've had a game where it was kind of, you know, it wasn't doing bad. It was doing okay, like sort of breaking even for about a year, and a year of tweaking and iterating, and like then we got it to a scale of profitability, and you know, you can sort of scale it up from there. But that developer knew, and they were sort of prepared to sort of, you know, continuously work on it, and they had a long runway. So that was kind of an ideal situation where you can just like, you know, keep working on it, where a game was already sort of, you know, it already showed potential. It just wasn't quite there yet. But yeah, some games, you know, when in soft launch already, you just see that the numbers are like by far not from where they should be, and especially in terms of retention. And then it might just be good to say like, hey, this is not going to happen. You know, this is just not. Back to the drawing board, basically.
Yeah, I just want to do a quick shout out to the audience. If you have questions, you can use the F&A or the Q&A button on your bottom menu, and you can kind of jump in anytime with any kind of question. If of course it is related to the conversation we have, and so feel free, please do that, use it, fire away.
I think when it comes to killing games, a good point that you sort of made was that it really depends on the status of the studio. If you have a lot of money that you can burn on trying to fix a project, then you can wait a lot longer. If you have some sort of like, I don't know, all-star, like famous like game designer or something who no matter what this person puts out, they're gonna get a ton of purchases, installs or whatever, then yeah, you can probably compromise a little bit more on what you're putting out. I think for us, we've sort of developed a process where for our concepts, we're much more clear about, you know, where we're killing them and at what state. And it kind of comes down to, you know, there's like the phrase, right? You go to war with the army you have. And for us, like, that's an important mindset. You know, there's always a lot of magical thinking about like, oh, we can just fix this or this, or marketing will fix it, or, you know, and that's just, it's like not really how things work. So we're very careful. We use several gates. So the first gate is we'll run like just CPI tests to see if there's interest in the games, meaning we'll create landing pages for the games and see how much it costs just to get somebody to click on a fake install button for games that don't really exist. Once we filter a bunch of terrible concepts out that way, we're left with some core ideas that we can prototype. And then we start testing just incrementally core things, such as, you know, what is the day one retention? if we go for a while, maybe a month or two, and we can't get day one retention past our threshold, which is usually day one of like 50% or better, because we're mobile, then we can comfortably kill a project. If day one retention is good, and then we move on to the next stage, which is usually return on ad spend. So we just want to make sure that we're roughly sticking it out so that our LTV is higher than our CPIs. And we've killed games at all stages along this road. The product that you can get from this varies. Obviously, with the marketing video, it's sort of it's lived out its entire existence in whatever Facebook console you're using to run these tests. But for something that gets far, has a decent day one retention, but maybe not a great CPI to LTV ratio, we'll still usually release that. And you can see examples on our App Store page that can live out their lives without too much support from us. So I guess it really depends there on how much risk you as a developer can stomach.
Yeah. One question to Bastian, because Liftoff is not only working in games, but also in other fields. Is there a big difference from game apps and non-gamer apps or non-game apps in regards to longevity and in killing off apps that don't work?
Yeah, maybe, sorry, just the creative discussion I found quite interesting. I'm coming to the other piece, just on the mini games / playables. In the meantime, I looked into a creative report, but I think they're not listed yet. Because, well, I'm working closely with Playrigs, Homescapes. I think most of the people are trying to copy what they are doing because they've become so successful. And they're experimenting a lot with it. I think there's another word for misleading ads and so on, but they are highly successful with it. And then they're running the creative test at first, and then they enhance their gameplay and adding in new levels based on all the thousands of tests they do per week. And obviously, not everyone is Playrigs and has the resources. Then in terms of those being banned in the UK, for instance, from our side, it's down to the exchanges. Obviously, that is the stage when you improved your game and you're ready to invest money into it. But that varies heavily by channel, if you can get through with those ads or not. So typically, we would be informed by Google or Twitter or so, and then would tell us, hey, stop that ad. But maybe till then, they already haven't made a massive increase on ROAS. So I found that quite interesting in context of the mini games. Now coming to other companies, I mean, it's usually companies, bigger brands, and I don't know, let's say like Delivery Hero, it's someone in Berlin we're working closely with, so they're not really going to kill their product, right? For them, it's more about acquiring new companies as they go in different markets they want to tap into that then already have shown high success in the markets they are. And that's the same for, well, I was saying like e-commerce, someone like Otto has a big brand, they're not just testing around because that can harm their brand. I think potentially dating is the most similar there, where they then try out to go in, well, kind of make a copy of a one app that works, then localize it in a different name, and try to push it there. But I think really, like what I'm seeing, like only the gaming vertical is so advanced that they are testing, or that they have short development times. And then the other thing is also in other verticals, especially e-commerce, it takes some time to actually calculate the LTV, especially from your advertising, and it's sometimes really tricky. Think you have it takes up to 30 days till you actually know the exact value of a purchase being made, if they can return their goods, if it's a fashion platform or so. When it comes down to optimization, then it can already be too late to apply changes. So I think that is probably the big difference to the gaming vertical, why they cannot move that fast, and that's why they're also rather late adopters when it comes to new channels or new things to test. Also on that side, they're probably looking then less into the ROAS because they cannot react on ROAS, so they need to look at the CPA, which doesn't then necessarily mean that it it actually converts into paying users. So I think it's a whole different beast in all the other verticals.
But when it comes to creating content, how far do you have to plan, or like kind of anything? How far do you have to plan in advance to have a rough schedule, or have roughly scheduled out the upcoming live events, anything you want to add, anything you want to renew with the game, with the app? Do you think that having a 2-year schedule is too much, or is it too little? Do you have any experiences with that? For example, Martine, how do you do that?
We typically sort of have a 1-year schedule, but that's also because we recycle updates. I mean, for example, right now for like the Halloween event, there's sort of a special room that is only unlocked for a certain amount of time that you can decorate. And the amount of players that are in the game for a year or longer is really, really small. It's less than 1%. So like for 99% of the players, it's all new, even though we already created it last year. And for like that, those users that are already in the game for such a long time that they see it again, they can actually pick up where they left off last year. So if they didn't manage to finish the room last year, then like great, all their assets are back and they can continue. And like on top of that, we do sort of add some new things, like some new furniture for the room or something, so that also for those players, there's at least like really something new and interesting to do and unlock, and to really make the event interesting for them as well. So yeah, that's why we sort of have this content release schedule of a year. Because as soon as we sort of ran that year, then we know that the costs for live ops in the second year and following can be quite a lot lower.
Yeah, it's on another side of that, like when you look at let's say looking at PC platform and free to play on PC or premium games, I think on that side, one of the dominating factors on there is like this kind of concept that preconception of the the Steam wishlist, like that is like the prominent way to get noticed early on, and then even if your game is out there live, being wishlisted affects somehow the ranking or something like that. And then I think the mobile has similar preconceptions about like marketing, discoverability, and I think ultimately like the only way to truly own that part would be to really own the relationship between your players and yourself, and I think that's really the key, especially like if you're looking to go cross-platform or you're doing a PC game and you're looking to expand from beyond mobile. In those cases, like I think on the PC side, I think most P&Ls to the original question are usually built for 12 months. Like that seems to be an industry standard where profit and loss is calculated for a product that is about to be launched for the next 12 months. And that based on that, usually financing and investment decisions are made quite often. And I've noticed the same on even for PC, MMORPGs, online games that are, games as service tend to have a little bit longer business plan. Like, they're looking at 24-month P&L instead of necessarily 12-month P&L. So it really depends on the game, but the more game as a service, the more longer you should plan to have like that game running and kind of plan for it to be supported.
For some of our initiatives, they're like year-long. So for instance, right now, we're doing something called Data 2020, which is basically our big push to become more of a data-driven gaming company. And a lot of that comes down to segmenting our users, A/B testing, and improving our live ops process. So that's taking a year because it's a gargantuan amount of work. For more short-term things, like live ops, which typically run about a week for us, initially we had to plan these pretty far in advance because we just didn't have the technology to deliver them quickly. We would have to bake in every single live ops event into the updates and do it far enough in advance where everybody would have it when we activated it remotely. In sort of, recent times, we're able to do these a lot quicker, so we can adjust a lot faster. So of course, there's always going to be a Christmas event or a series of Christmas events in December. We're going to do Halloween, we'll do Thanksgiving, but sometimes we need to adjust really quickly, kind of depending on what's going on around the world. So a good example of this was during the early stages of COVID. We had to move a bunch of our events that were timed around sports because the seasons weren't starting, and it just like wouldn't make any sense if we do like a baseball event, but baseball's been postponed for 2 months or something. People would be maybe a little bit confused depending on our messaging. So we've had the advantage now that we're a little bit more nimble, and we typically plan those out maybe a month or 2 months in advance, exactly what our live ops event schedule will be, and then staggered in between our updates. So if we want to add, interesting new features or mechanics, usually we'll need about 3 to 6 months in advance, depending on the complexity of the mechanic, in order to schedule them properly. And to Miikka's point, actually, when it comes to featuring and things like that, like planning that far out is super important when it comes to communicating with our partners at the platforms who need a huge amount of early warning before they're able to do anything like feature you. So we have to figure out what we're going to do, 3 or 4 months in advance, and then about 2 to 3 months in advance, we need to tell the platforms so that they can get prepared if they think that the update is worth featuring.
Okay, would you say that the smaller the studio, the better it is to plan far in advance in order to get the schedule done, and that the bigger you are, the more you can kind of react to certain events and switch the schedule?
I think it depends on your the type of game you're running and the type of like events that you have. Like I think small studios are probably going to be really constrained by their just like the technical advantages or disadvantages, so they won't be able to I mean, unless they're super nimble, they probably won't be able to deploy timely events in advance or like really quickly, right? So it's like, they're announcing a new holiday in 2 weeks, we need an event for that in 2 weeks. It might be hard for a small studio to do that. So I think it depends on the probably like certain things should be part of the I guess the long-term strategy, such as planning around holidays. Like small studios should be thinking from the get-go, okay, it's January now, and if this game is running by December, we're going to need something in December. So let's think about like something we can do around that. Or let's think about, if we have a sports game, let's make sure that we have something that we can do, no matter how trivial, come time that the particular sports is happening. If you're planning around the Olympics, make sure that like if you have an Olympic themed game, make sure that there's something that's actually happening around the Olympics. Otherwise, you're probably missing your window. Yeah, I think it probably depends on your capabilities and probably also the type of game. I noticed that, for instance, Among Us now has gone like full tilt into holiday stuff, and they probably like they're a small studio, right? Interslop is 3 people or something. And now they're pushing out like Halloween content. I'm sure in a month they're going to push out like their Christmas content. So they probably had to readjust their entire roadmap in order to accommodate like the new expectations of them for them.
as far as I understand, like they had no idea how unprecedentedly popular it would become. I mean, they thought they had an amazing game. I actually heard that they can recognize that, but they probably didn't have like a full going business plan because it was an unprecedented success, right? It won the race for a great 2020 game together with like games like Animal Crossing. It's definitely going to leave this year with Among Us is going to be there. Fall Guys, you know, the same. And like the funny thing is, like I would say arguably like out of the biggest games in 2020, Animal Crossing perhaps was the most planned one. That, you know, is a big franchise that was an overdue sequel. So for example, Animal Crossing, they probably have a roadmap of multiple years, right? Because it's a big IP. They know that they can push money on it and it will return money. If you build it, they will come. It's one of those products. But I think with you know, games like Among Us, probably I would actually love to ask the developer, like, did they actually plan for 12 months or they just wanted to put it out there? You know, which is sometimes the case, as we all know. Sometimes it's just like, well, let's put it out there and see what happens. To all the science and expertise in game industry, it's still a game of luck and timing, which is completely unplannable, right, Nate? You know this pretty well as well. Like being a long time in mobile industry, this is some games just completely flop, and some just explode and become huge things unexpectedly, right?
Yeah, from what I understand, they also canceled the sequel, but like because of the success, I think it's like the typical mobile game story where like something crazy takes hold and becomes the dominant story of that year. Like I could compare it to like Flappy Bird or something. This is like the Flappy Bird with retention. Granted, I think they put in significantly more work than went into Flappy
I love
Bird.
that actually. That's a great analogy. I love it, Nate. I'm gonna steal that from you.
The Flappy Bird with attention, yeah. And I mean, I want to give them credit because they put in a lot of work, and there's like, you know, they're dealing with like massive amounts of players and scaling their backend infrastructure. Yeah. So I'm sure it's like a huge headache over there. But yeah, it is super unexpected. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder what it's like over there, what they're working on.
I also wonder, I don't know myself, but I actually wonder, like, because, you know, the game is cross-platform. They have like, you can play it on Steam, Mac, iOS, everywhere. I think they did launch on all platforms at the same time. So I'd love to see comparative numbers, especially now with COVID and this kind of game, where is the most engagement and retention, like which versions, and compare the data. I wish I could be a fly on the wall for Among Us specifically.
I think, yeah, everybody could. I think because we have 90 minutes of discussion right now, and what I want to do before I'm asking the last question, I again want to ask the audience if they want to participate with questions in the Q&A, because so far we're still waiting for the first question here.
We got 14 people, right?
We've got 14 people right now.
Yeah, 14. I'm looking at 14 people. Is that correct? Like, I actually never done this before, but
yes.
Zoom says attendees 14.
Yes.
Excluding us, right?
Yes.
No need to be shy. This is just a video chat, guys.
Yeah.
Stop browsing the news and playing Among Us and give us some questions.
Nothing coming so far.
I think they're just being shy or
maybe
completely not wearing a t-shirt even. Just woke up and haven't showered, and everybody's shy because of that. Oh, it is almost 12, so I'm looking at your names, people, audience, and I'm adding you in LinkedIn. I will stalk you if you don't ask a question. I will remember this.
They will never dare to attend the panel again, you know.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of different, right, guys? Like, this is my first panel doing a video call panel. Like, I haven't done before, but it's curious to see the names of attendees here directly. I can see everybody's background, just LinkedIning at the same time. What a world we live in.
Yes, it's different, definitely. Okay, if there's nothing coming from you, I'm going to ask a question that is actually related to what we're talking about right now, which is the times we're living in. So again, to people who are in here and probably belong to the video games industry, or writing about the video games industry, with the lockdown that has been announced yesterday by our chancellor, which will be probably the same in any other countries across the world and or Europe, like Martine and Miikka. Do you think that this is a good time to actually bring out games that people will play more, that people will, regardless of their financial situation, will be spending money on mobile games and any kind of interactive entertainment? And this goes out to all four of you.
This is the best, man, like Tim, this is the best time to launch a mobile game. Any like PC game, Nintendo Switch, new consoles coming, PlayStation 5, you name it. Like, this is the spotlight year for video games. Many companies are seeing record-breaking numbers compared to any historical record before. People are making, Steam is making record amount of sales. Like, every day has become a weekend. Like, this is the time. Like, if you have a game idea that you've been cooking on, now is the time to put it out, because right now people will have the most time to spare to play your game and play and consume a lot of games than they normally would, a lot more.
Yeah, I think also referring back to the data that I showed earlier, it's to acquire a user, it's really cheap. So if you're looking into paid channels, and I mean, obviously the step before that we just discussed, how to make your gameplay sticky and so on. I showed the flip side that driving users through the funnel is more expensive, but if you're confident with your game, that you have a good game out there, then also it would make sense to invest now into paid channels. And I guess that's not only programmatic, but also social and search. So that there's much more inventory out there because there are more users, more games in general. So you find more impressions, also means more competition. But if you are positive with your game, and then go out there and publish it.
Okay, yeah, I was actually gonna make a little remark that I'm wondering what the CPIs for user acquisition are gonna do this holiday season, as I'm sure that a lot of the marketing budgets will go towards online products. So yeah, it's it's something I cannot predict, but of course I'll be following closely because it impacts our business quite a bit.
That's a good point. Obviously, we're doing our business forecasts and stuff like that. So usually it's Q4, especially November and December. We see, particularly in gaming, then a decrease. Just had a call with a client yesterday who's about to launch a lot of games. And they're still trying to figure out if it makes sense to do it in November or December, or to wait till Q1, because then obviously the retail e-commerce brands are pulling out of the market. Christmas is over. Then the flip side is with IDFA deprecation, which is probably coming in February, I think. You may want to do your tests before and create a data baseline that then allows you to run incrementality tests or so on, to understand how it's been before. Because then on iOS, at least for now, Android is probably also becoming soon. You don't really know what's going on anymore. So whatever test you're running, it might make sense to do it in Q4 and then perhaps follow down like the slide CP increase. The other point on that, obviously there's already not personalized traffic, so LAT traffic. If you target those users, they tend to be much cheaper. CPMs are much lower. Yeah, it's technically not high quality users. But that's if you test that with a partner, that's probably where you can win something, because those CPMs and CPIs tend to be different there.
So you're putting a lot of effort, Martine, into Q4 to be present to be present with your mobile games under the Christmas tree. Is it something where say yes exactly right now?
It's not like, we're waiting for Q4 to go all out or something. Our marketing campaigns are kind of more of a constant. We don't do sort of blasts of marketing, but it's kind of a sort of a constant trickle. But traditionally, looking at sort of normal years, when it comes to new game launches, we just usually hold off in December. Just like Bastian just explained, that is typically sort of a kind of an expensive month to start your UA. So in other years, we would wait till January. But this year we're not going to launch a new product in the next 2 months, so we're not in that situation. But for a new game that's probably going to be ready in January, that is kind of an interesting point with the DFA appreciation. See how that pans out.
And to wrap it up, Nate, are we going to see a lot of new idle games in the coming 6 to 12 months?
Well, that's the goal. So we are aiming to have something released around Christmas. We're aiming for a big update to Idle Miner Tycoon around Christmas. With regard to the other games in the pipeline, I think we're beginning to develop a fairly good cadence. So we have a few different teams. We have small teams that are making, maybe less ambitious games that will probably have tests out pretty quickly. We have a slightly larger team that is working on maybe more ambitious projects, and so their cadence is going to be a little bit slower. And then we also opened a new studio in Romania that is basically trying to come out with really, really fast idle games. And they are just building their studio. It's the first time we've opened a external studio. So I think I'm not sure when they're going to be like ready to hit the ground running. But once they are, I think you'll see a lot of new titles. My estimate is that the majority of which you'll probably start seeing late Q1, maybe mid Q2. But when it comes to timing around the holidays, I think we're pretty cognizant of the fact that it is extremely competitive. So although we're releasing there, like we're not pinning all of our hopes on December just because it's sort of like it's like a crazy time. Actually, I think it may be less crazy than it used to be. Like in the early days of the App Store, if you like they had this like ridiculous thing where they would like lock the charts. I don't know if anyone remembers, but like they would lock the charts like a week or two like before Christmas, because presumably like platform employees were just like at home chilling with eggnog or something, and they didn't want them to mess something up, which meant that like it was insane right during the holidays. But now it seems like there's so many players out there and everybody has a different strategy that it's less. As a game developer, you're probably like less desperate for like the coveted featuring during this period, simply because it's not gonna pay like the huge dividends. Also, I think discovery on the platforms is maybe less of a factor than it used to be. There's a lot of like subcategories, whereas before there was like one game that was featured. So I think we're basically we're just going to continue with our process that we outlined earlier when it comes to when we kill projects and how we test projects. And if it lands around the holidays, great. If not, we'll make do with whatever date we can get it out.
Okay.
And yeah, like I can attest to the fact that user acquisition for December is usually the most expensive month. It will probably be this year as well, but to a different degree, right? Like and that remains to be seen.
So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, the audience, for joining this session. I hope you stay with us at the Games Week Berlin. There's a lot of program going on Zoom, on Twitch, and you can, of course, mingle on Discord. And have a good day. Have a wonderful Q4, and see you around soon.
Thank you, guys. It was lovely.
Thank you all.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Nice to be meeting you as well. Take care.
Take care.